5 years of marriage to my germaphobe billionaire husband, Ethan Shaw. And today, I found a suspicious, murky stain on the passenger seat of his sports car. Just as I was about to confront Ethan, his secretary, Chloe Reed, walked up. Tugging at her tight, micro-mini skirt, she flashed a sweet, apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Shaw. I have a habit of going commando, and I think I might have ruined Mr. Shaw's beautiful leather seats. My bad." Ethan merely nodded, completely unfazed. "It's fine. Don't worry about it." That night, I gave Ethan a cold warning. I don't share dirty men. If anything like this happens again, we are getting a divorce. The very next day, he fired Chloe. I thought that was the end of it, until the day my mother passed away. That afternoon, I received a Snapchat video from Chloe. Through a foggy glass window, I could clearly make out two tangled silhouettes. And then came Ethan's heavy, lust-filled voice over the speaker. "Stop playing around." My eyes welled with tears. Before I could save the video, she deleted it. A sharp pain pierced my chest. Without hesitation, I texted my divorce lawyer. "Draft the divorce papers immediately. I want them ready now." On the day of the funeral, Ethan arrived late. He looked as elegant and high society as ever, but as he stepped closer, I caught the scent of sweet, cheap perfume clinging to his designer suit. I looked down. Right on his collar, partially hidden, was a dark red hickey. The last ounce of warmth in my heart died right there, washed away by the freezing rain. He walked up to me, but before he could say a word, a figure burst into the chapel. It was Chloe, Ethan's ex-secretary. She was wearing a loud, skin-tight red dress that hugged her hips, with a carefully painted look of grief on her face. She walked straight toward Ethan. "Summer, please accept my condolences," she said softly. Suddenly, her heel twisted. With a sharp gasp, she lost her balance and fell directly into Ethan's arms. Ethan didn't push her away. Instead, his hands instinctively gripped her waist. In the chaotic stumble, Chloe lifted her face just as Ethan leaned down. Their lips met. Softly, easily. Ethan frowned slightly, holding her steady. His voice was low, gentle, and filled with a helpless indulgence I had never heard before. "Careful." The blood in my veins turned to ice. My mind instantly flashed back to that provocative video. He had used that exact same indulgent, breathless tone when he whispered, "Stop playing around." It made me think of our wedding night. I had put on a beautiful silk nightgown, gathered all my courage, and gently kissed his lips. It was just a light, fleeting touch. But he had shoved me away so violently that I hit the nightstand. He rushed into the bathroom, and I heard him dry heaving inside. After that, he spent a full 30 minutes brushing his teeth, almost self-harming, until his gums bled heavily. When he finally walked out, his face was pale and his eyes were dead cold. "Summer, I told you. Do not touch me." The whispers of the guests rushed over me like a tide. The looks they threw at me were filled with curiosity, pity, and a sick sense of amusement. My father, Arthur Vance, turned absolutely livid. Clenching his fists, he muttered under his breath, "Is this how the Shaw family shows respect to the deceased? What a disgrace." Grandpa Charles Shaw banged his cane heavily against the marble floor. "Enough. What kind of circus is this? Do you have no shame, Ethan?" Ethan's face turned pale. He finally let go of Chloe, but he still kept her shielded behind his back. He lowered his head to Grandpa Charles. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. Chloe didn't mean to. She didn't mean to." Such a light, effortless excuse. With those words, he dragged my dignity, my dead mother's memory, and the entire Vance family name through the mud. I spoke, my voice so calm that it sounded foreign even to me. "Ethan, take her and get the hell out of here." He stared at me, a flash of panic and guilt crossing his eyes. He quickly stepped closer and whispered, "Summer, don't throw a tantrum at a time like this, okay? Chloe just tripped." He was still defending her. I looked him dead in the eye, repeating his words. "A tantrum? You are openly defending another woman at your wife's mother's funeral, and you think I'm the one throwing a tantrum?" His lips parted, but the words that came out broke my heart completely. "I owe her, Summer," he pleaded quietly. "Please, don't make this look any uglier than it already is." Behind him, Chloe peeked out, her eyes wet with fake tears, but sparkling with triumph. At that moment, I actually laughed. Why should I care about making a scene? No matter how hysterical I acted, nothing could hurt more than the knife he had just plunged into my chest. I said, "Get out." "Are you deaf?" Ethan closed his eyes in pain. Ultimately, he turned around, took Chloe by the arm, and escorted her out of the chapel. As Chloe passed me, she shot me a smug, victorious look. And Ethan didn't even dare to look at me again. The funeral finally ended. I forced myself to say goodbye to the remaining guests before walking alone into my mother's old bedroom. The room still smelled of her. I stared at the photo of her gentle, smiling face on the vanity. And, just like that, the tightly wound string inside me snapped. A wave of overwhelming grief and the crushing humiliation of betrayal washed over me. I covered my mouth to muffle my sobs, but my knees gave out and I slid down to the cold floor. My mother's face in the photo blurred. Eventually, everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I tried to move my hand and felt the cold prick of an foreline. The door opened, and a tall man in a white lab coat walked in. He wore gold-rimmed glasses and had a gentle, comforting presence. It was Luke Montgomery. I had only met him once at a charity gala. He was the heir to the prestigious Montgomery family, but he had chosen a quiet life as a humanitarian doctor. "You're awake." He handed me my chart. "Summer, you are 6 weeks pregnant. But due to extreme emotional distress and exhaustion, you are showing signs of a threatened miscarriage. If you want to keep this baby, you need absolute bed rest." My heart sank. My hand instinctively flew to my flat stomach. This baby, the one I had prayed for, the one I had gone through so much pain to conceive, was now nothing but a cruel joke. My father stood by the bedside, his brow furrowed in anger. He and my mother had lived separate lives for years, and he had his own mistresses and secret kids. His fury right now wasn't out of love for me, it was because Ethan's public stunt had embarrassed him. That absolute bastard. Just wait till he gets here. I'm going to ruin him. But within minutes, my father's phone rang. He took the call and left immediately. In the end, I was still completely alone. By evening, Ethan showed up. He was carrying a thermal flask, his expression tense. Seeing me awake, he let out a sigh of relief and rushed to my side. "Summer, how are you feeling?" I didn't look at him. He began to ramble, trying to justify himself. "About yesterday at the funeral. I'm sorry, but Chloe has no one in the city. She's completely helpless, and I couldn't just leave her. I need you to understand that." I slowly turned my head and stared at him. The man before me felt like a complete stranger. "Did you ever try to understand me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Ethan, do you remember what I did to make you comfortable with me?" I soaked my hands in harsh disinfectant, washing them over and over until my skin cracked and bled. "It took me 5 whole years of patience just to get you to willingly hold me. But Chloe? She gets to stay in your car. She gets to be cradled in your arms at my mother's funeral. Tell me, Ethan. Why?" My voice was shaking, every word dripping with raw pain. His face turned completely pale, and he couldn't find a single word to say. Silence was the most brutal answer. It told me, loud and clear, that my 5 years of devotion were nothing but a massive joke. Ethan couldn't look me in the eye. Seeing how agitated I was, he tried to do what he always did, throw money at the problem. "Summer, to make it up to you, I'll set up an art foundation in your mother's name. The Shaw Group will fully fund it. Think of it as a tribute to her." He was always like this, measuring everything with money. My feelings. His guilt. And now, even my mother's dignity. "Get out," I spat. He froze, shocked by my tone. He had never been spoken to like this before. I grabbed the pillow behind me and threw it at his face with all the strength I had left. I said, "Get the hell out of my sight." Late that night, a friend sent me a screenshot of an Instagram story. In a cozy dessert shop, Chloe was leaning sweet-tempered against Ethan's shoulder. She was holding a spoon of half-eaten ice cream up to his lips. Ethan's head was turned toward his phone, but he didn't push her away. The caption read, "He still only eats what I feed him." This was the same man who would vomit if I offered him a bite of my cookie. The same man who insisted on sanitizing our shared silverware dozens of times before touching it. Yet, he was perfectly fine eating ice cream Chloe had already put in her mouth. My stomach churned violently. I scrambled out of bed, rushed to the bathroom, and threw up until nothing was left. Staring at my pale, hollow reflection in the mirror, I felt a deep, sickening disgust. I wasn't just disgusted by him. I was disgusted by myself for having crawled in the dirt for him for 5 long years. After getting discharged, I went alone to the gallery where we first met. 5 years ago, I held my first solo art exhibition here. The gallery had been packed that day, but Ethan had stood in front of a painting called The Caged Bird for an entire afternoon. I thought I had found my soulmate. Standing in front of that same painting now, I realized how foolish I had been. He didn't understand my art. He just saw his own reflection in it. And I was just a self-righteous savior who had willingly jumped into a tragedy of my own making. The next day, a lawyer from the Shaw Group delivered a thick stack of documents. It was a family trust fund for my and Ethan's future children. "Mrs. Shaw, this is from the elder Mr. Shaw and Mr. Ethan Shaw," the lawyer explained. "If you have a child, they will automatically become the 3rd largest shareholder of the Shaw Group. This trust." Grandpa Charles had always pushed us to have a baby to secure our business marriage and Ethan's inheritance. I used to look forward to this, enduring endless medical treatments and humiliation just to conceive. Now, this document felt like a fresh slap in the face. I cut the lawyer off calmly. "No need. We won't be needing this trust fund. Ever. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with Ethan Shaw. Later that afternoon, I went to the equestrian club. Before I officially walked away from this marriage, I wanted to paint one last piece as a farewell to the baby in my womb. But I didn't expect to run into those two again. Chloe was dressed in a tight, fiery red riding outfit, looking radiant. Ethan stood by the fence, his eyes locked onto her. Suddenly, Chloe shrieked and fell off her horse. Ethan's face went completely pale. Without a second thought, he bolted toward her. As Chloe whimpered in pain, Ethan completely forgot his germophobia. He scooped up her dirt-covered body and rushed her toward the medical clinic. My paintbrush hovered in midair. The sun was warm, but I felt freezing cold. I remembered the time I had a sudden panic attack and collapsed in our living room. Ethan had stood a safe distance away, shouting for the housekeeper and the doctor, but he never once reached out to touch me. It turned out his germophobia was selective. It wasn't that he couldn't touch anyone. He just didn't want to touch me. My heart went completely numb. I guess when disappointment reaches its peak, all you feel is absolute exhaustion. That evening, my assistant called, her voice frantic. "Summer, there's trouble. Ethan just beat up Victor Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Corp., because of Chloe." My head throbbed. What? Apparently, Chloe claimed Victor harassed her. Ethan barged right into their business dinner and beat Victor so badly he's in the ER. Ethan was covered in cheap booze and blood, but he didn't care at all. He went straight back to the office to call an emergency board meeting. Overnight, he managed to tank Sterling Corp stock. I listened in silence. For Chloe, he could be reckless. He could fight. He could tolerate the dirt and blood he hated most. He could throw all his principles out the window. For Chloe, he could do anything. I quietly hung up and emailed the signed divorce papers to Ethan. Then I drove back to my art studio. This time, I wouldn't give him another chance to explain. I went back to the penthouse studio to grab my medical records. The place was a wedding gift from Ethan, overlooking the river. But when I pushed the door open, the sight before me made my stomach turn. The studio was a total mess. The air was thick with the unmistakable, musky scent of sex. The painting I had spent days working on for my baby was ripped off the easel, thrown onto the floor, splattered with random paint, and covered in dirty footprints. Beside the easel lay a discarded lace bra and adult toys. My breathing stopped. Rage and disgust boiled in my chest, quickly replaced by an icy, hollow feeling. I let out a bitter laugh, knelt down, and began packing my paintbrushes and sketches into a box. Just as I taped the last box shut, the electronic lock on the front door beeped. Then came the sound of heavy breathing, giggling, and a woman's suggestive whimpers. "Ethan, let's do it right here." Then, Ethan's strained, familiar voice replied, "Stop." I hid behind a large canvas, watching coldly. Chloe was wrapped around him like a snake, kissing him aggressively while her hands worked on his shirt buttons. Ethan's breathing was shallow and fast. He made a weak, stiff attempt to push her away. But that resistance lasted only a few seconds before he gave in. A wave of nausea hit me, and I accidentally knocked over a jar of brushes. Ethan snapped his head toward the sound. When his eyes met mine, he panicked and violently pushed Chloe off him. "Summer, let me explain," he cried out, his voice cracking. "I've been looking for you ever since I got the divorce papers. There's nothing going on between us, I swear." He reached out to grab my arm, but froze when he saw the sheer disgust in my eyes. I have this place cleaned every day. I don't know how she got in." "Summer, please don't leave. Don't look at me like that. Can we please just talk?" He was rambling, his eyes filled with genuine panic. But Chloe just laughed. She stepped forward and kicked my packed box of art supplies, sending my sketches and paint jars flying across the floor, ruining my clothes. She leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "Summer, what explanation do you want? Want him to admit he loves me more? A pathetic woman like you doesn't deserve to have Ethan's baby anyway. Honestly, I feel bad for your dead mother. She probably died just to get away from a depressing loser like you." "Shut up." My self-control snapped. I raised my hand and swung it hard toward her smug face. But before my hand could land, my wrist was grabbed in a brutal grip. It was Ethan. He pulled Chloe behind him and shoved me back. I saw it clearly. His brows were furrowed, and his eyes were filled with a deep, ugly irritation I had never seen before. He looked like a completely different person from the man who had just begged me to stay. I stared at him in utter shock. Time seemed to slow down. The sheer disgust in his eyes was sharper than any of Chloe's venomous words. It felt like my heart had been pierced, letting the very last drop of my warmth drain out. I stumbled backward, my lower back crashing hard against the heavy wooden easel. A sharp, blinding pain exploded in my abdomen. My vision went black, and I felt a warm, terrifying rush of liquid running down my legs, staining my dress red. Bam! The studio door was kicked open. Luke rushed in, looking frantic. He had probably come looking for me because I hadn't answered his calls. The moment he saw the pool of bright red blood beneath me, he ran over and scooped me up into his arms. "Are you insane? Luke roared at Ethan, his eyes burning with fury. Did you seriously not know she was pregnant? Ethan froze on the spot, his hands trembling violently. Pregnant? No, how? Ethan's voice was a trembling whisper, the arrogant, high society facade cracking to reveal a hollow, desperate boy. But I couldn't care. The pain in my abdomen was a white-hot iron, searing away the last remnants of my 5-year-long, foolish devotion. I looked down at the bright red blood spreading across the white floor of my studio, staining the canvas of the unfinished painting I had created for my child. It looked like a blooming, grotesque rose. Summer. Ethan lunged forward, his hands shaking violently. For a man who couldn't stand the touch of a doorknob without sanitizing his skin, he actually reached for my blood-soaked dress. But he never touched me. Luke Montgomery stepped between us like a wall of solid ice. With a swift, brutal shove, he pushed Ethan back. Ethan stumbled, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the wet paint and blood on the floor. Don't touch her, Luke hissed, his voice vibrating with a terrifying, quiet rage I had never heard from the gentle doctor. You've done enough. Before Ethan could react, Luke scooped me up into his arms. He didn't care about the blood soaking into his pristine white lab coat, nor did he care about the acrylic paint smearing across his chest. He held me tight, shielding my face against his shoulder as he ran out of the studio. Behind us, Chloe's voice squeaked, Ethan, look at him. He's taking your wife. They must have been having an affair all along. Slap. A sharp, resounding crack echoed through the hallway just before the elevator doors closed. It was the sound of Ethan's hand hitting Chloe's face. But my heart felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness. Just a vast, freezing void. In the back of the ambulance, the world spun in a blur of flashing red lights and the sterile smell of oxygen. Luke held my hand the entire time. His palms were warm, dry, and clean, not the chemical, burning cleanliness of Ethan's sanitized hands, but the natural, life-giving warmth of a man who cared. Stay with me, Summer, Luke whispered, his gold-rimmed glasses slightly askew, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. Keep your eyes on me. Don't close them. Luke, my voice was barely a sigh. It hurts. I know, sweet girl. I've got you. When we arrived at the hospital, I was wheeled straight into the emergency room. As the bright surgical lights overhead began to fade into a dark, suffocating fog, I felt a strange sense of relief. It's over, I thought as my eyes slipped shut. The nightmare is finally over. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window pane. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft green glow of the heart monitor. The sharp, agonizing pain in my stomach had dulled into a heavy, hollow ache. My hand drifted down to my abdomen. It was completely flat. The tears didn't stream down my face, they had dried up long ago in that studio. I simply stared at the ceiling, feeling like a hollowed-out tree. The baby, the little life I had quietly cherished, the one that represented my final, desperate hope for a family, was gone. Summer. I turned my head slowly. Luke was sitting in the chair beside my bed. He looked exhausted. His chin was dark with stubble, and his eyes were bloodshot behind his glasses. He had changed into a clean set of blue scrubs. The surgery went well, he said softly, reaching out to gently squeeze my fingers. But, I'm so sorry, Summer. We couldn't save the baby. I know, I whispered. My throat felt like sandpaper. Thank you, Luke, for saving me. He squeezed my hand tighter, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't have to thank me. I only wish I had gotten there sooner. Before I could reply, the door to the VIP recovery room was pushed open. Ethan stood in the doorway. He looked like a ghost. His hair, usually styled perfectly, was messy and damp from the rain. His designer suit was wrinkled, and there was still a smudge of dried blood on his cuff. He looked at me, his eyes wide and desperate, filled with a raw, agonizing guilt. Summer, he took a step forward, his voice cracking. Thank God you're awake. I've been waiting outside all night. The doctor said you were out of danger, but I had to see you. Get out, Luke said, standing up. His tall frame blocked Ethan's view of my bed. She needs to rest. You are not welcome here. She is my wife. Ethan snarled, a flash of his usual arrogance returning, though it was weak and hollow. This is between me and my wife, Montgomery. Get out of my way. Your wife. I spoke up, my voice cold and flat. Both men froze. Ethan pushed past Luke, rushing to the side of my bed. He dropped to his knees, reaching out to grasp my hand, but I pulled my arm away and tucked it beneath the heavy white blanket. Ethan's hand hovered in the air, trembling. Summer, please. I didn't know about the baby. If I had known, I swear to God I would have never let Chloe near the studio. I would have never pushed you. I was angry because I thought you were trying to hurt her and I didn't want things to get uglier. Because you owe her? I asked, a bitter, lifeless smile playing on my lips. Tell me, Ethan. What exactly do you owe Chloe Reed that is worth my mother's dignity, my self-respect, and now our child's life? Ethan's breath hitched. He closed his eyes, his forehead resting against the edge of my mattress. Her father died saving mine in a kidnapping attempt 15 years ago. My grandfather made me promise to look after her. I didn't love her, Summer. I swear I don't love her. It was just a responsibility. I felt guilty because my family's wealth was bought with her father's life. So you paid her back with my life instead, I said. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. A kidnapping attempt 15 years ago, I repeated, staring out the dark window. And to pay that debt, you let her stain your car. You let her hold your hand. You let her feed you ice cream from her own spoon, something you would have rather died than let me do. You let her humiliate me at my mother's funeral. I was drugged. Ethan suddenly cried out, looking up at me with panicked, bloodshot eyes. The night of the video, and the day at the dessert shop, she put something in my drinks. I've already had the lab test my blood from yesterday. She was using my guilt to manipulate me, Summer. I've already had her arrested. She's in police custody right now. I promise you, she will rot in prison for what she did. I looked down at his handsome, miserable face. Once, even a single tear from this man would have broken my heart. I would have rushed to comfort him, to tell him it was okay, to wipe his tears away with my own hands. But now, looking at him, I felt nothing but a deep, sickening exhaustion. It doesn't matter, Ethan, I said quietly. What do you mean it doesn't matter? He grabbed the edge of my blanket, his knuckles turning white. I've punished her. She's gone. We can start over, Summer. We can have another baby. I'll hire the best doctors in the world. I'll make sure you have everything you want. I'll never look at another woman again. I signed the divorce papers yesterday. I interrupted him, my voice completely devoid of emotion. My lawyer has already filed them. Because of the evidence of your public infidelity and the physical harm that led to my miscarriage, the court will grant the divorce immediately. I don't want a single penny of the Shaw Group's money. I don't want your art foundation. I don't want your excuses. No, Ethan whispered, shaking his head frantically. No, I won't sign them. I'll never sign them. You're my wife, Summer. You can't leave me. She can, and she will, a stern, booming voice echoed from the doorway. We all looked up. My grandfather, Charles Shaw, walked into the room, supported by his assistant. Beside him was my father, Arthur Vance. Grandpa Charles looked 10 years older. He stared at Ethan with a mixture of profound disappointment and cold fury. Grandpa, Ethan gasped, standing up. Slap. Grandpa Charles raised his heavy wooden cane and struck Ethan hard across the shoulder. Ethan didn't flinch, but his head bowed low. You disgrace, Grandpa Charles spit, his voice shaking with rage. I groomed you to be the successor of the Shaw Group because I thought you had a cold head but a righteous heart. Instead, you let a gutter snake manipulate you, ruined our family's reputation, and killed my great-grandchild. Grandpa, it wasn't like that. Silence. The old man roared. He turned to look at me, his eyes softening slightly, though they still held the calculating look of a lifelong businessman. Summer, my child. I am deeply sorry for what this fool has done. The Shaw family will compensate you. I will personally transfer 5% of the Shaw Group shares to your name, and... I don't want it, Grandpa Charles, I said, cutting him off. I want nothing from the Shaw family. I only want my freedom. My father, Arthur, stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Summer, don't be foolish. 5% of the Shaw Group is worth billions. You can't just walk away with nothing. I looked at my father. The man who had secret mistresses, who had never loved my mother, and who only cared about how much money he could milk from this business marriage. Father, I said, my voice dead. If you want that money so badly, you can marry Ethan yourself. I am divorcing him. And as of today, I am cutting all ties with the Vance family as well. You ungrateful brat, Arthur yelled, stepping toward my bed with his hand raised. But Luke stepped in front of him, his eyes flashing with a dangerous, icy light. Mr. Vance, this is a hospital, and I am the chief physician of this ward. If you threaten my patient again, I will have security throw you out, and I will personally ensure the Vance family's medical lines are severed from every Montgomery-funded facility in the country. Arthur's face turned purple, but he didn't dare say another word. The Montgomery family's medical empire was vast. Offending them meant financial suicide for any high society family. I looked at Luke, and for the first time in days, a faint warmth touched my cold heart. Ethan, I said, turning my gaze back to my husband one last time. If you have any shred of humanity left in you, sign the papers. Let me go. Ethan stared at me. He looked at my pale, lifeless face, my empty womb, and the absolute lack of love in my eyes. For 5 years, I had looked at him with nothing but warmth and adoration. Now there was only a cold, endless desert. He slowly closed his eyes, a single, heavy tear rolling down his cheek. Okay, he whispered, his voice barely audible. If that's what you want, Summer, I'll sign. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. I didn't go back to the penthouse. I didn't even go back to my old bedroom at the Vance estate. With Luke's help, I moved into a small, quiet cottage on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by a lush forest and a small, bubbling creek. It was a property owned by the Montgomery family, completely private and heavily guarded. Ethan tried to find me, of course. His assistant called my phone dozens of times, and his car was spotted driving around my old gallery, but Luke's security team kept him far away from my new sanctuary. On the day the divorce certificate was officially delivered to my hands, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. I sat on the wooden porch of the cottage, holding the thin piece of paper. It felt incredibly light, yet it carried the weight of 5 years of my youth, my tears, and my broken dreams. I took a lighter from the table, struck a flame, and held it to the corner of the paper. I watched as the names Summer Vance and Ethan Shaw turned to black ash, carried away by the gentle afternoon breeze. It's done. Luke walked onto the porch, carrying 2 mugs of warm chamomile tea. He had discarded his formal lab coat and suits, wearing a soft, gray cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He looked younger, relaxed, and incredibly handsome. It's done, I said, accepting the mug from him. The warmth of the ceramic seeped into my palms, soothing the lingering ache in my body. I'm officially a free woman. Congratulations, he said softly, sitting down on the wooden bench next to me. He didn't push himself into my personal space, always keeping a respectful, comfortable distance. What do you plan to do now? I want to paint, I said, looking out at the forest. But not here. Not in the city. Every street, every building here smells like bleach and cheap perfume. I want to go somewhere far away. Somewhere clean. Luke smiled, his eyes warm behind his gold-rimmed glasses. I have a small villa in a town called St. Paul-de-Vence, in the south of France. It's a beautiful place, filled with art, cobblestone streets, and the scent of wild lavender. No one will find you there. You can paint to your heart's content. I turned to look at him, touched by his thoughtfulness. Luke, why are you doing so much for me? We barely knew each other before all of this. Luke stared into his mug, a faint, melancholic smile playing on his lips. Do you remember the charity gala 3 years ago? The one where you auctioned off your painting, The Caged Bird. I nodded slowly. Yes, Ethan bought it. Actually, he didn't, Luke said, looking up to meet my eyes. He only bid on it because his grandfather told him to support his wife's hobby. But I was the one who desperately wanted that painting. I bid against him until the price reached $5 million, but your father forced you to withdraw the painting from the auction to give it to Ethan as a private gift to show off your marital bliss. I stared at him in surprise. I didn't know that. I saw you that night, Summer, Luke whispered, his voice filled with a deep, long-hidden emotion. You were wearing a beautiful blue dress, but your eyes were so incredibly sad. You looked just like the bird in your painting, trapped in a golden cage, desperately trying to sing, but no one was listening. I promised myself then that if I ever got the chance, I would help you open that cage. My heart trembled. For 5 years, I had thought I was completely alone in my misery, that no one saw the bruises on my soul. But this man had seen me. He had seen the real me, through a single painting, from across a crowded room. Thank you, Luke, I whispered, my eyes misty. You don't have to thank me, Summer, he said, his voice soft but steady. Just promise me one thing. What? Live for yourself now. Not for your father, not for a husband, and certainly not for the ghosts of your past. Just paint, breathe, and be happy. I looked out at the golden sunlight filtering through the trees. For the first time in 5 years, the heavy, suffocating weight in my chest began to lift. I promise, I said. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city, the Shaw Group's headquarters was shrouded in a suffocating, icy tension. Ethan Shaw sat at his massive mahogany desk, staring at the empty space where a silver-framed photo of Summer used to sit. He had thrown the photo against the wall in a fit of rage 3 days ago, shattering the glass. Now, only the blank, cold wall remained. The door to his office opened, and his secretary, a middle-aged, highly professional man who replaced Chloe, walked in, trembling. Mr. Shaw, the police have finished their investigation into Chloe Reed. Ethan didn't lift his head. His voice was raspy, completely stripped of its usual commanding power. And? They found several bottles of a highly restricted sedative and hallucinogen in her apartment. The chemical analysis matches the trace elements found in your blood sample from last week. She had been microdosing your coffee and water for the past 6 months. Ethan's fists clenched so hard his knuckles popped. They also found several burner phones, the secretary continued, swallowing hard. On one of them, there were text messages between her and a psychiatrist. It seems, she knew about your severe germophobia and PTSD from the kidnapping 15 years ago. The drugs she gave you were specifically designed to lower your cognitive defenses and make you highly suggestible, especially under stress. Ethan closed his eyes. The memory of the past few months flashed through his mind like a twisted, horrific film. He remembered the constant headaches. He remembered the strange, foggy state of mind he was always in. He remembered how, Whenever Chloe was near, his mind would feel sluggish, his limbs heavy, and his usual visceral disgust for physical touch would magically fade into a numb, compliant haze. He had thought he was healing. He had thought he was finally overcoming his trauma. Instead, he was just a puppet, drugged and manipulated by a greedy, ruthless woman who wanted to climb into high society by using his family's ancient debt. And the studio? Ethan asked, his voice shaking. How did she get into Summer's private studio? She copied your electronic key card while you were drugged at the office. She hired local actors to trash the place and scatter those items, to make it look like a crime scene of passion. She wanted to force Mrs. Shaw into a divorce so she could take her place. A crime scene of passion, Ethan muttered, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping his throat. He looked at his hands. The hands that had pushed his pregnant wife. The hands that had shielded the very monster who had destroyed his life. He had prided himself on his intelligence, his cold logic, and his absolute control over his empire. Yet, he had let a cheap, vulgar woman play him like a fool, while he systematically destroyed the only person in the world who had ever loved him unconditionally. He remembered Summer's hands. For 5 years, she had soaked her hands in harsh disinfectants, washing them until they bled, just so she could hold his hand without triggering his panic attacks. She had endured his coldness, his rejection, and his violent outbursts on their wedding night. She had sacrificed her dignity, her youth, and her own health to build a bridge over his trauma. And the moment he had healed, or so he thought, he had handed all of that progress, all of that warmth, to another woman. Did you ever try to understand me, Ethan? Her shaking, heart-wrenching voice echoed in his mind, cutting through him like a dull saw. Where is she? Ethan asked, standing up so fast his chair flipped backward. Where is Summer? Have you found her yet? The secretary shrank back, his face pale. We tracked her to a cottage on the outskirts, but it's a Montgomery property. The security there is elite, mercenary grade. Our men couldn't get within a mile of the perimeter. And our sources at the airport just reported that. Reported what? Speak. Ethan roared. Mrs. Shaw, she boarded a private flight to Europe 3 hours ago. Her name is no longer Summer Vance. She legally changed her name back to her mother's maiden name, Summer Gray. She's gone, Mr. Shaw. She's completely left the country. Ethan felt as if the ground beneath his feet had suddenly dissolved, plunging him into a dark, bottomless abyss. He fell back onto his desk, his breathing fast and shallow. The germophobia that had been suppressed by the drugs suddenly slammed back into him with a violent, terrifying intensity. The air in the office felt thick, filthy, and contaminated. He looked at his desk, his pens, his leather chair, everything felt dirty. He rushed to the private bathroom in his office, turned on the hot water, and began scrubbing his hands. He scrubbed until the skin turned red. He scrubbed until the soap turned pink with blood. But no matter how much he washed, he couldn't wash away the filthy scent of cheap perfume, the metallic smell of his wife's blood on his studio floor, and the agonizing, permanent realization of what he had lost. 3 years later. St. Paul de Vence, France. The afternoon sun bathed the ancient stone town in a warm, golden glow. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming lavender, wild rosemary, and fresh pastries from the local bakery. In a spacious, sunlit studio overlooking the rolling hills of the French countryside, I stood in front of a massive canvas. My hair was tied back in a loose, messy bun, and my simple white linen apron was splattered with vibrant blues, deep purples, and brilliant golds. My hands, once red, cracked, and bleeding from harsh chemical disinfectants, were now healthy, smooth, and covered in the clean, earthy scent of oil paint and linseed oil. I took a step back, holding my paintbrush, and smiled. The painting was titled The Flight of the Lark. It depicted a beautiful, radiant bird soaring out of a dark, shattered silver cage, flying toward a brilliant, golden sunrise. It was a sequel to The Caged Bird, but this time, there was no sadness, no trap, and no suffocating walls. Only absolute, breathtaking freedom. The wooden door of the studio creaked open, and a gentle breeze blew in, carrying the scent of fresh coffee. You've been painting for 4 hours straight, Luke said, walking in with a tray of fresh croissants and 2 cups of espresso. As your doctor, I must prescribe a mandatory 15-minute break. I laughed, setting my brush down on the easel. Yes, Dr. Montgomery. I wouldn't dare disobey my doctor's orders. Luke smiled, setting the tray down on a small wooden table. He walked over to stand beside me, looking at the painting. His eyes, warm and full of admiration, swept over the canvas. It's beautiful, Summer, he said softly. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever painted. It's because I'm happy, Luke, I said, looking up at him. For the first time in my life, I am truly, completely happy. It was the truth. Over the past 3 years, my life had transformed completely. Under the name Summer Gray, I had become one of the most celebrated contemporary artists in Europe. My exhibitions in Paris, Milan, and London had been massive successes, with critics praising the raw, emotional depth and the vibrant, life-affirming energy of my work. But my professional success was nothing compared to the peace I had found in my personal life. Luke had been by my side every step of the way. He had never pressured me, never demanded anything from me. He had simply been there, a quiet, steady anchor in the storm of my recovery. He had helped me heal, not just physically, but emotionally. He taught me that touch didn't have to be associated with pain, rejection, or clinical cleanliness. With Luke, a touch was a warm hand holding mine during a walk through the lavender fields, a gentle kiss on my forehead when I fell asleep on the couch, or a tight, comforting hug when the ghosts of my past occasionally crept into my dreams. The gallery owner in Paris called this morning, Luke said, handing me a cup of espresso. The International Art Exhibition in the city next week is fully booked. They've already sold out all the VIP tickets. Really? I took a sip of the warm, rich coffee. That's wonderful. And there's something else. Luke hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly behind his glasses. The Shaw Group has recently expanded its business into the European art market. They are the primary sponsors of the exhibition next week. My hand paused, the warm coffee cup hovering near my lips. Ethan. For 3 years, I hadn't heard his name. I had blocked his number, ignored the news, and cut off every single person from my past life, including my father, who had reportedly gone bankrupt after the Montgomery family pulled their investments from his businesses. But I knew deep down that a man like Ethan wouldn't just vanish. Do you want me to cancel the exhibition? Luke asked, his eyes filled with a deep, protective concern. We can pull your paintings out of the gallery immediately. You don't have to face him, Summer. I looked at my painting, the beautiful, soaring lark, free and untouched by the dark cage below. I smiled, a genuine, fearless smile. No, Luke, I said, reaching out to gently squeeze his hand. Don't cancel it. I've spent 3 years running away, healing, and rebuilding my life. I am no longer the weak, desperate girl who crawled in the dirt for a man's pity. Let him come. I want him to see exactly what he threw away. Chapter 5. The Grand Exhibition. The Grand Palais in Paris was spectacular. Chandelier lights glittered against the high glass ceilings, casting a warm, majestic glow over the hundreds of high society guests, art critics, and celebrities dressed in elegant evening wear. As the star of the night, I wore a stunning, emerald green silk gown that draped elegantly over my shoulders, showing off my healthy, radiant skin. My hair was styled in soft waves, and a simple, elegant diamond necklace rested against my collarbone. Beside me, Luke looked dashing in a classic black tuxedo. His arm was wrapped gently around my waist, his presence giving me an unwavering sense of security. Ladies and gentlemen, the gallery director announced over the microphone, his voice echoing through the grand hall. Tonight, we are honored to present the solo exhibition of the world-renowned contemporary artist, Summer Gray. Applause erupted through the hall. I smiled, raising my glass of champagne to the crowd. As the guests dispersed to view the paintings, I walked through the gallery, chatting with collectors and critics. The feedback was overwhelming. People were deeply moved by the emotional journey displayed in my art, from the dark, suffocating tones of my early works to the brilliant, explosive colors of my recent pieces. I was standing in front of the Flight of the Lark, explaining the inspiration behind the golden hues to a prominent French collector, when the crowd suddenly went quiet. A path cleared in the center of the hall. A man walked into the gallery, escorted by several bodyguards. It was Ethan Shaw. My breath caught for a fraction of a second, but I quickly calmed my racing heart. He had changed drastically. The cold, arrogant, untouchable billionaire of the past was gone. In his place was a man who looked hollow, pale, and deeply exhausted. His tailored black suit seemed a little too large for his thin frame, and his dark eyes were sunken, surrounded by deep shadows. He didn't look at the other guests. He didn't look at the expensive sculptures or the glittering chandeliers. His eyes were locked onto me. As he walked closer, I noticed something that made my heart feel a strange, detached pity. His hands were covered in thin, white cotton gloves. Even in a high society event, he couldn't stand the thought of touching anything. His germophobia had evidently gotten worse, consuming him completely in my absence. Summer, he whispered as he finally stopped a few feet away from me. His voice was trembling, a raw, fragile sound that seemed completely out of place in this grand hall. The surrounding guests began to whisper, recognizing the CEO of the Shaw Group and realizing the connection between his presence and the artist. Luke immediately stepped forward, his expression turning cold. Mr. Shaw, this is a private exhibition. If you are here to cause trouble, I will have security escort you out. Ethan ignored Luke completely. His eyes, filled with a desperate, agonizing longing, never left my face. Summer, please, he pleaded, taking a half step forward. I've been looking for you for 3 years. I went to St. Paul Defense, but your security wouldn't let me near your villa. I sponsored this entire exhibition just so I could see you. Just so I could talk to you for 5 minutes. I looked at him calmly, taking a sip of my champagne. Mr. Shaw, I said, my voice smooth, polite, and completely devoid of any personal emotion. If you are here as a patron of the arts, you are welcome to view the paintings. But if you are here for anything else, I'm afraid I have no time for you. Ethan's face turned even paler, if that was possible. Summer, don't call me Mr. Shaw. Please. I've punished everyone. Chloe is serving a 15-year sentence in a maximum security prison. Your father's company is bankrupt, and he has fled the country. I've cleaned everything, Summer. I've rebuilt our penthouse. I've hired the best therapists. I can touch people now, I can touch you now. I've spent 3 years training myself to hold your hand without panic. He frantically pulled off his white cotton gloves, throwing them onto the floor. He reached out to grab my hand, his bare, trembling skin exposed to the air. See? He whispered, tears streaming down his face. I can touch you, Summer. I won't push you away. I swear to God, I will never push you away again. Just come back to me. Let me make it up to you. Let me love you the way you deserve. I looked down at his bare hand. Once, I would have given my life to see him do this. I would have cried tears of joy to see him overcome his trauma just to hold my hand. But now, looking at his bare, shaking hand, I felt absolutely nothing. No spark, no anger, no regret. Just a mild, passing discomfort at the scene he was making. Ethan, I said softly, using his name for the first time in 3 years. His eyes lit up with a sudden, desperate hope. Yes, Summer? I'm here. I'm right here. Do you know why you can touch me now? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. He froze, his breath catching. Because I love you. Because I realized how much you mean to me. No, I said, shaking my head with a gentle, pitying smile. It's because I no longer care. When I loved you, my love was a mirror that reflected your pain, your trauma, and your guilt. You pushed me away because you hated yourself and you hated the fact that I saw right through your broken shell. I took Luke's hand, interlacing my fingers with his. But now I've broken that mirror, I continued, looking up at Luke, who smiled down at me with absolute warmth and devotion. I don't care about your trauma anymore. I don't care about your guilt. To me, you're just a stranger. And, because you're a stranger, your touch has no power over me. It can no longer hurt me, and it can no longer heal you. Ethan stared at our joined hands. His eyes filled with a profound, shattering despair as the finality of my words sank in. He realized that the cage was truly broken. The bird had flown so high, so far into the golden sunrise, that she could no longer hear his cries from the ground. No, he whispered, dropping to his knees on the polished marble floor, right in front of the painting The Flight of the Lark. No, Summer, please, don't leave me in the dark. I can't live without you. I can't breathe in this dirty world without you. He reached out to grasp the hem of my emerald green gown, but Luke stepped in front of him, blocking his path. The exhibition is over for you, Mr. Shaw, Luke said, his voice cold and commanding. Security, escort him out. 4 large, professional guards immediately stepped forward, grabbing Ethan by his arms. He didn't fight them. He let them drag him away, his eyes still locked onto me, weeping like a broken child, his bare hands scraping against the cold, dirty floor of the gallery. As the doors of the Grand Palais closed behind him, the crowd began to murmur again, but the gallery director quickly smoothed things over, playing a soft, classical melody over the speakers to restore the elegant atmosphere. I let out a long, quiet breath, feeling a profound sense of closure wash over me. Are you okay, Summer? Luke asked, his hand gently stroking my back, his eyes filled with a deep, protective tenderness. I looked up at him, the love of my life, the man who had helped me open my cage and taught me how to fly. I am more than okay, Luke, I said, leaning in to gently press my lips against his. The kiss was sweet, warm, and filled with the promise of a beautiful, clean, and boundless future. We turned back to the gallery, walking hand in hand toward the bright, golden light of my paintings, leaving the dark, shattered remnants of my past far behind us in the shadows.